In this video, we're going to be talking about starting a sentence with only after or only if and using inversion. So it's going to be quite a good grammar lesson, and I hope it is useful for you. So we're going to learn in this video how to start our sentence with only after or only if, and how we will be using inversion in our sentences. So first of all, you might say, well, what does inversion mean? Inversion means when we change the position of the subject and the auxiliary verb in our sentence. So what is an auxiliary verb? An auxiliary verb is verbs like can, could, will, would, do, does, did, might, should. All of these are auxiliary verbs, verbs that usually help the main verb. That's what we call auxiliary verb. So in our sentence, usually we have the subject first and then we have the auxiliary verb. But inversion means when you have the auxiliary verb first and then you have the subject. So we change the position. Let's look at a couple of examples. I might. I've got my subject I, my auxiliary verb might. I might in inversion turns into might I. So first now, after inversion, first I have my auxiliary verb and then I have my subject. Let's look at another example. You can, after inversion, turns into can you. So first my auxiliary and then my subject. Let's look at one more example. We're just looking at examples of inversion. So she is my subject, will is my auxiliary. She will, when we invert it, turns into will she. So now we know what inversion means and we know what it looks like. Okay, so let's go and start making sentences with only after, and we'll be using inversion. Let's look at an example. You can only play after you finish your homework. I am giving a condition, for example, to a student or a child. You can only play after you finish your homework. This is a perfectly good sentence. It's grammatically correct. The only thing is, it's a very simple sentence and it starts with the subject, so it's a typical normal sentence. As you go up in your grammar, you need to start writing in a more advanced way. So now, instead of starting with the subject, I'm going to start with only after. Because I have only and after in my sentence, I'm going to now use only after at the beginning of the sentence. I'm not going to start with the subject. I'm going to start with only after. And I'm going to see two changes in my sentence. Only after finishing your homework can you play. So I've seen two changes from my first sentence. When I start with only after, my sentence changes in two ways. Two things happen. The first one, when I use only after, my next word is a gerund. Only after finishing. And the reason why this is a gerund is because after is a preposition. And every time we have a verb after a preposition, it has to be the gerund form. So the first change I see here is when I use only after, my verb becomes ing, it becomes the gerund. I see another change as well. I see inversion of auxiliary verb and subject. Only after finishing your homework can you play? So here, can you is the inverted version of you can. In my original sentence, I had you can, but now that I'm using inversion, it's turned into can you. Only after finishing your homework can you play. And you might ask me, well, Layla, why do we write like this? Firstly, this is more advanced. This is an advanced way of writing, and as you progress in your grammar, you need to show your advancement, and this is one way of showing it. And the second reason why this is happening is because I'm starting with only after, and the rule is when you start with only after or only if, which we're going to talk about later, and many other examples, we have to use inversion. So we cannot say only after finishing your homework you can play. That is wrong. It has to be can you play? So now that is the correct structure of this sentence. I've used only after and I've used inversion. Let's look at a couple more examples. This machine only works after you plug it in. So this is another condition. This machine only works after you plug it in. So if you don't plug in the machine, it won't work. Therefore, this is a conditional. It is a first conditional. This machine only works after you plug it in. Now we'll start the sentence with only after. So remember before we said when I have only after, I use the gerund. And my verb here is plug in. Plug in. So my verb needs to become a gerund. Only after plugging the machine in does it work. Now here I have does, and that is because in this sentence my main verb is works. If I want to invert it, I need to take away the S, which will be does, and then I need to invert it. Does it work? And it means the machine. So again, two things have happened here. Only after plugging the machine in, or plugging in the machine, they're both the same, does it work. I've got only after with my gerund, and I've got the inversion of the auxiliary verb and the subject. So does it instead of it works, I put does it work. Okay. Now I'm going to give you the opportunity for you to try. You tried this sentence. You try changing this sentence to using only after, and remember to invert the subject and auxiliary. I only noticed that my glass was broken after I filled it. What would the inversion of this sentence be? Okay, so let's remember when we use only after, I need to use my gerund. And my gerund, I'm going to use the verb that I have. So let's see what the answer is. Only after filling my glass did I notice it was broken. I only noticed, so this is past tense, I need to remember that. I only noticed that my glass was broken after I filled it. Only after filling my glass, so here I have my verb fill, it's going to get the gerund. Only after filling my glass, and then I have the verb notice. Here it was past simple, so here it also needs to be past simple but inverted. Only after filling my glass did I notice it was broken. Okay, so up to now we have learnt how to change a sentence with only and after to start the sentence with only after, add the gerund and invert the auxiliary, the subject and auxiliary. Next, we're going to look at only if, and this is a lot simpler. I'm including this in this video because it's a lot simpler. First, we're going to look at some examples, and then I'm going to see if you can see the rule. Only if. I will only agree to talk at the conference if everyone is silent. I'm going to write with only if. Only if everyone is silent will I agree to talk at the conference. Let's look at another example. I will only help you if you help me later. Only if you help me later will I help you. My last example. I have only ever been to the cinema if a good film has been showing. Only if a good film has been showing have I ever been to the cinema. Can you see the rule? So what's happening in these sentences? What's going on here is there are two parts to each sentence. We've got the only clause, for example, I will only agree to talk, I will only help you, I have only ever been to the cinema. So the part of the sentence that has only, we call it the only clause. And then we have the if clause that I have underlined in all of these examples. So we've got two clauses in every sentence. When we use the structure only if, we use only if plus if clause, and then we use the inversion and then the rest of the sentence. For example, I might only babysit your daughter, so this is going to be my only clause because I've got only. I might only babysit your daughter if she behaves. This is the part of the sentence that has if, therefore this is the if clause. And my grammar rule says that only if plus if clause plus inversion plus rest of sentence. Only if she behaves might I babysit your daughter. So I've got only if, I've also included my if clause, she behaves, I've got my inversion, instead of I might, I've got might I, and then I've got the rest of my sentence, babysit your daughter. I might only babysit your daughter if she behaves. Only if she behaves might I babysit your daughter. So in this video so far, we have learnt how to use only after with gerund and inverting the auxiliary and the subject. And we've learnt only if. We use it with only if plus the if clause, and then we use inversion and then the rest of the sentence. And that's only when we use these two at the beginning of the sentence. There are many other versions of only and another word, and there are other ways of writing these sentences as well, but this is just one video highlighting one structure of these two. I hope you find this video useful. Thank you.